broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Today is Monday, October 18th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to DDA's webinar for the National Disability Employment Awareness Month, America's Recovery, Powered by Inclusion. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar, by computer and by phone. And if you look at the panel interface on your right labeled audio, you can click either computer or phone to switch for the best option. There is one handout in the handout section, and you can click on there and download it right there. If you're listening by phone, you can email me, donna.will@maryland.gov, to get a copy emailed to you. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the DDA website. And I guess we'll get started. So now I'd like to introduce Kathleen Walker. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Donna. Thank you so much for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kathleen Walker. I am the Director of Employment and Family Supports for the Developmental Disabilities Administration Eastern Shore Regional Office. And thank you for joining us here today. We're very excited to celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The theme of this year is America's Recovery, Powered by Inclusion. And I will first be going over the agenda before our leadership who have joined us today are going to be saying some few opening remarks. But first, we want to get started by celebrating people who are currently employed. So please enjoy this first video.
Can you tell me what your job is?
I apologize. I just was notified that you can't see the current video, so I'm going to restart that. I apologize.
Kathleen, I could see the video.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
I
see
was
it.
just notified that I couldn't see that the video wasn't being shown.
If they click on the little flower on the bottom of the ribbon of their computer, they may be able to see. It'll bring everything back up as a default, so maybe that would help.
Okay. Let's see if we can start. Great. So thank you so much for bearing with me for the first video, but wasn't that fantastic to hear from so many people that were employed, and we'll have more of these employment celebrations throughout the entire day. So we're really excited to be able to highlight and really hear directly from people who are currently competitively employed. So for right now, I'm going to go over today's agenda so that you get a little snippet of what's to come. We're going to have opening remarks by the Deputy Secretary, Bernie Simons, and the Governor's Proclamation being presented by Christian Mealey from the Department of Disabilities. And then we are also going to have opening remarks from the Director of the Division of Rehabilitation Services, Scott Dennis. So we're really excited for all of our leadership to be here to talk about NDEMA and the type of work that Maryland has been doing over the past year in our efforts to return to work and recovery. Then we have a really great other additional employment celebrations, as I mentioned before. We have the national and state employment data trends, and very great colleague and guest, John Butterworth from the Institute for Community Inclusion, who will be presenting some innovations and kind of where we go from here related to COVID-19 impacts on employment and our return to work efforts, both nationally and through the state. And then I will actually be doing DDA employment policies and innovations, a year recap and a little bit of a history look back on how far we've come to support employment first for all people. And then we will be wrapping up and seeing what we will be doing, looking to the future to continue to support employment for all. So with that, I would like to introduce Deputy Secretary Bernard Simons from the Developmental Disabilities Administration for his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you do great.
Okay. Well, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It's really a distinct honor to be celebrating October, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and the hard work and the dedication that all of the community members, such as yourself, have done to contribute to the success of employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And as Kathleen just said, this month it's basically entitled America's Recovery, Powered by Inclusion. And that really reflects the importance of ensuring that people with disabilities have full access to employment and also community involvement during the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic that everybody's lived through for the past all of 20 basically and into this year. And so it's important to highlight that the work that's been done during that period of time, and also to show that the resilience and supporting people in competitive integrated employment and return to work. We know that some people, their employers are basically closed and then reopened slowly. People who are in the restaurant business, had working, if they were waiting on tables or whatever, outside before there was any type of inside, as reflected in Governor Hogan's orders about reopening, as he did that throughout the last almost 18, 20 months. And so we also are proud to partner with our Outcome Employment Data Project. And, we get support from John Butterworth and the staff at the Institute of Community Inclusion at UMass Boston, which is a showcase for the University Center of Excellence and one of the projects of national significance. And so as we continue to move forward with this on competitive employment, we looked at the data, and data collection in May of 2021, obviously during the first year of the second year of the pandemic, 21, since we started in 20, showed a 3% increase in jobs, or 250 new people were in competitive employment, and 16 individuals had contracted jobs, up from the previous reporting period. So we know that our data collection is showing that the overall employment rate is up to 22% in the state. And that's been an increase from the previous October. And many of you know that we collect data twice a year. So, you know, we've seen constant growth since we've been working with UMass Boston and you being so diligent in giving the data to John Butterworth and his staff so that we can analyze this and see how we're moving forward in the state and assisting people with disabilities getting jobs and gainful employment. We also learned that a lot of people were employed with technology. And, you know, it's given us a new opportunity as, you know, we look forward to moving forward and hopefully getting the pandemic behind us, and we will, that offering a lot of opportunity for people to engage in employment using, you know, assistive technology and other devices that will support people in their communication needs and engagement, so that we can continue to promote integrated employment for all people. And again, I want to thank you for your time and your efforts in making us, Maryland, an employment first state. And many of you may realize that back a few years ago, DDA had a quote unquote public policy fellow who actually led that with multiple providers around the state. So, you know, again, I need to applaud everybody for all of the hard work that you've accomplished in the last few years, and as we continue to move forward in Maryland.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for your opening remarks. Next, we have Christian Mealey, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Disability, for his opening remarks and Governor's Proclamation. Christian?
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who helped me work through these technical difficulties. I was a little worried I wasn't going to be able to join you because of that, but good afternoon. Again, I'm Christian Mealey, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Disabilities, and I'm thrilled to celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month with you and to recognize the importance of this month-long celebration. First, I want to bring you greetings from Secretary Carol Beatty and all your friends at the Department of Disabilities. Secretary Beatty was disappointed she couldn't be here, so unfortunately, you're going to have to settle for me. But I'd also like to thank the organizers of today's event. We certainly appreciate the hard work that it takes to handle the logistics, especially nowadays, and still, you know, manage to bring everyone together. Expanding employment accessibility is perhaps the area I'm most passionate about, and certainly do a tremendous amount of work with Jay Gingrich from our department, because we know that our state is at its strongest when all of its residents are able to contribute to community life and benefit from those collective contributions. Full and meaningful employment for all Marylanders, including those with disabilities, is a top priority of our administration. And again, we know that a Maryland that's truly open for business means that all citizens must have the opportunity to work, including those with significant barriers. So as we focus on the recovery of our state and businesses from the effects of the pandemic, you know, we're making a point to have everyone included in the recovery planning and process. To that end, we recently released our new state disabilities plan, which is our quadrennial plan. And one of the main focus areas is financial well-being. That's one of our 5 guiding principles that drives the plan. Reason being is employment is really the foundation upon which economic independence is built. And as a result, it's a major focus of our efforts. For example, I think it's 5 years now ago that Governor Hogan signed the Ken Capone Equal Employment Act, which phased out the 14C certificates and or the use of sub-minimum wage jobs for people with disabilities. Which is a bill I proudly voted for when I was a member of the House of Delegates. And, you know, Maryland has recently completed the phase out of sub-minimum wage. And I can tell you that the work on the 14C issue underscores what we all know, that no one group can do this work alone. We all have to come together to address concerns, identify opportunities, and move the ball forward. The Maryland disability community has certainly made that commitment. Employment for all Marylanders, including those with disabilities, is a top priority for the Hogan-Rutherford administration, as has been stated already. But we are really proud to that Governor Hogan proclaimed every October Disability Employment Awareness Month in Maryland. And with this in mind, I'd like to now present the Governor's Proclamation for 2021. So let me just pull up the text on my screen so I can read that. Okay, so the proclamation that we're proud to present reads, Governor's Proclamation, the State of Maryland, Disability Employment Awareness Month. And it reads, whereas Disability Employment Awareness Month is an opportunity to recognize the contributions of workers with disabilities and through national and local campaigns, create greater awareness of the talents and skills individuals with disabilities bring to employers. Whereas we believe in a Maryland which recognizes the unlimited potential for all of our citizens, including those with disabilities, to live, work, and thrive in our communities. Whereas in Maryland, we are dedicated to the principles of the Americans with Disabilities Act, particularly as it relates to the rights and freedom for people with disabilities to work and advance in their chosen careers and lead independent and full lives in their communities. Whereas we recognize the contributions of essential employees with disabilities who continue to serve our communities during the pandemic. And whereas we are committed to the principle that business profits by investing in workers with disabilities, Maryland will continue to strive to expand employment opportunities for Marylanders with disabilities and consider work the first option for working age adults with disabilities, thereby giving every Marylander a chance to contribute to the state's economic life and reap the rewards of that contribution. And whereas we are changing Maryland for the better by promoting equality of opportunity, access, and choice for Marylanders with disabilities, and are committed to the promise of a Maryland in which all people with disabilities have the knowledge and influence to make a difference in their lives and the lives of others. Now, therefore, I, Lawrence J. Hogan Jr., Governor of the State of Maryland, do hereby proclaim October 2021 Disability Employment Awareness Month, and hereby commend this observance to all our citizens and encourage them to participate and promote events throughout the year which celebrate the rights and abilities of those with disabilities. And that is the proclamation. And I just wanted to thank you again for having us, and thank you to the sponsors and organizers for hosting today's event. It's important we take time to celebrate these employment success stories, as we just saw in that wonderful video that Kathleen played just a few minutes ago. And thank you all for being here today and committing to the collective work as partners to ensure that competitive integrated employment is a reality here in the state of Maryland. So with that, I just want to wish everybody a great rest of your day and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for those opening remarks and for the Governor's proclamation. We really appreciate your advocacy and the Secretary's support in creating and maintaining the fact that Maryland is an employment first state, and we celebrate this month every year. So with that, next, I would like to introduce Director Scott Dennis from the Division of Rehabilitation Services for his opening remarks. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I want to welcome everybody to today's gathering. My name is Scott Dennis. I'm the Assistant State Superintendent for the Maryland State Department of Education's Division of Rehabilitation Services. As an agency that focuses on competitive integrated employment for individuals with disabilities, it's always been a pleasure to gather with those individuals who are so passionate and focused on ensuring that competitive integrated employment is an option for all. Your dedication to the Employment First initiatives, even amongst the pandemic, contributes to the success of many, especially Doors customers. During this past year, to give you an example, Doors was able to successfully support 368 individuals with IDD, DD in achieving competitive integrated employment. For Doors, this represents about 1/3 of our competitive integrated placements this past year. This is truly a great accomplishment for us all. While COVID has certainly challenged us in ways that we could not ever imagine, it has brought a unique employment opportunity, the likes that I personally have never seen. The state's economic environment is opening doors to the ID/DD community to job prospects that may not have existed in the past. I just recently met with an employer who's looking to expand their business. We had a discussion about job carving, customized employment, having a job coach or mentor on site. At no point did that employer blink or was discouraged in any of that type of discussion. So the opportunities are there for our clients to have a meaningful job in a truly integrated environment. The moment is now for us to pursue non-traditional employment opportunities across the state with our employers. Our employers are actively seeking employees with above minimum wage, with signing and retention bonuses for all. All it takes is a simple question. Would you be willing to hire somebody with IDD or DD? I strongly encourage DOORS and DD staff and our DD providers to seek out employers and develop these relationships that will make the employer an valued partner in employment opportunities for individuals with ID and DD. Together, DOORS and DDA have a long history of collaboration and working closely together to align our systems whenever possible to better support our dual customer. DOORS continues to work closely with DDA on both the state and local levels. We continue to value this close collaborative relationship with DD on the Employment First initiative. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and welcome you this afternoon alongside our DDA and MDOD partners. And thank you for your dedication and resilience under the Employment First initiative. I foresee and look forward to many fully integrated employment opportunities for those we serve. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you so much, Scott, for your opening remarks and for the commitment from the Division of Rehabilitation Services to be such a collaborative partner with DDA and including the State Department of Education to support Employment First. We really appreciate your opening remarks. So with that, I'm going to play another video. And as reminded, these are submissions, and I will talk a little bit more at the end of the webinar about the support that we had in creating these great videos to highlight workers. So please enjoy this next video. All right, great. I love those employment videos and hearing directly from people what they do and why they like working. And sometimes you can see some themes. They like working with their coworkers, getting paid, above or at minimum wage. And it's really wonderful to also see how many people report that they just love helping people. So I think that's fantastic to highlight. So next, we are going to have our wonderful guest, John Butterworth, from the Institute for Community Inclusion, Director for Employment Systems Change and Evaluation. John, I'm going to just, when you need me to move a slide, just let me know, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Kathleen. I've had the opportunity to work with Maryland as part of your membership in the State Employment Leadership Network. The SELN is a learning community of currently 24 state IDD agencies that are committed to employment first and improving employment outcomes and learning from each other. I've also, as Deputy Director Simon said, had an opportunity to work with you on your employment outcome data system, and we'll talk a little bit about that data in a minute and talk about it in relationship to some of what we're seeing, particularly as we move through the pandemic and national trends. And finally, more recently, a chance to work with some of the organizations that support people in employment in Maryland that reflect Maryland's and DDA's commitment to improving employment outcomes. Next slide. So it's been an interesting time and a hard time for folks who are working. A lot of people who, at least for a short time, stepped out of their employment situations. Many people are still working on getting back to their employment situations. Those are experiences that were true for all people with and without disabilities. The data that's on screen now comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly report. You know it from the unemployment statistics that get talked about a lot, but really understanding how many people are working is a more important metric. As in every other economic crisis, people with disabilities, the dotted blue line, lost jobs more quickly and deeper than people without disabilities. So we start in February 2020 with 0% as the number of people, the raw number of people that were working in February 2020. By April, people with disabilities had dropped off almost 20% fewer people were working. People without disabilities, about 15% fewer people were working. And we've been in a long, slow but steady recovery. Kind of the interesting part of the recovery, and it relates a little bit to previous comments about the opportunity that currently opportunities that currently faces. Starting in about May of 2021, those two lines crossed, and people with disabilities were recovering their participation in the labor force at a higher rate than people without disabilities. And as of August 2021, there were slightly more people, raw numbers, slightly more people with disabilities working than there were before the pandemic. People without disabilities, the number working is still less than the number working before the pandemic. They have not fully recovered to the same level of employment. That suggests that there are opportunities out there. That suggests that people with disabilities who are interested, and people tell us they are, in joining the labor force, are beginning to take advantages of those opportunities. And it opens some windows for us. Next slide, please. Maryland has been a leader in keeping people employed, and as Deputy Director Simon said, supporting people to become employed over the years. This is data from early on in the pandemic, May to June of 2020, from 7 states that are members of the State Employment Leadership Network, who asked their providers to report on people's employment status. Overall, people in individual competitive jobs, that's the blue bars, Overall, slightly more than 50% of people stopped working at that point who were being supported by a state agency. Many of those people were furloughed or laid off. Some of those people were voluntarily not working. Maryland retained about 65% of people in jobs, considerably higher. States varied from a low of about 33%, and that reflects both state policy, whether they were choosing safety over individual choices, and the way states were supporting people's ability to stay employed. Maryland is at the high end of that range at about 65% of people in individual jobs staying employed. Kind of the other takeaway from this number is the power of an individual job. People in individual jobs were more resilient at staying employed than people in group supported jobs. And if you were to look at it, people who are in any kind of facility-based work. Next slide, please. Part of what we learned is our ability to pivot and provide supports in different kinds of ways. The organization APSE surveyed providers at several points during the pandemic. And one of the things they asked about was the use of remote or virtual employment supports. At the time of the survey, at the time of this particular survey, around 87% of providers reported that they were using remote or virtual employment supports. That was a jump from 35% pre-pandemic. It shows the importance, but also the power of thinking creatively about how we support people in jobs. And our challenge, in part, is to figure out how we continue to use those kinds of lessons learned as we move forward. Again, Maryland's a state that is the first state to embed language about virtual supports that reflect what we've learned in the pandemic in permanent waiver language. Next slide. The other part of that message from APSE is the vast majority of providers, 85%, say they're likely or very likely to keep using remote and virtual supports. It's part of our fabric now. It's a tool that we have at our disposal. It's clearly not the only or always the right way to support people, but it's a way to expand our ability to support people and expand our effectiveness in supporting people in ways that reflect what they want. Because in many cases, what we learned is people can be supported with a much lighter touch than we had thought previously. Next slide. So part of what's interesting is that even in the middle of the pandemic, some people went to work. Director Simons talked about growth from October 2020 to October 2021. This goes back a little earlier and looks at October 2019 to October 2020. In the state of Maryland, if you looked at individuals, pulling out from the data that you provide to us if you're a provider, if you look at individuals, there were 343 new individual competitive jobs, people who had not been working prior to the pandemic, 76 new individual contracted jobs. That's over 400 people who began working in individual employment, even during the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, at the height of the impact of the pandemic. We have still continued to grow employment for individuals who weren't previously working. Next slide. I talked a little bit earlier about Maryland's ability to keep people working. Like all states, between the first bars here, the blue bars, which are October 2019 pre-pandemic to October 2020, there was a drop off in employment, but Maryland maintained people in jobs at a higher rate than other states did. I'm going to primarily focus on just that first section of this chart. So you drop from 26% of people in October 2019, 26% of all those who receive a day or employment service in the state of Maryland from DDA. You had 26% of people working in an individual job. That's about 11% higher than the national average. Maryland has been a leader in making some of these investments. You dropped off to 17%, about 65% of people continued to work. Still a substantial percent working for that point. And we're beginning to see the recovery. So that jumped from 17% back up to 20% in May of 2021. So that trend is happening. That reflects some of that trend we saw in the national data on the general labor market, as we see that gradual recovery back up to pre-pandemic levels. Next slide. We talk a lot about percent working. Oh, not the right next slide. You know, why people aren't working still is an interesting piece to look at. And in the most recent couple of data collection rounds, if someone wasn't working because of COVID, there was a question about why people were not working. The percent that were furloughed or laid off has started to drop off. This is the main numbers. The percent who were furloughed or laid off has started to drop off, but there's a fairly large wedge, the green wedge there, of people who are voluntarily not working. That could be because of their personal concerns for safety and concerns about the pandemic. It could be because they're in a living situation. So voluntarily may not be their own personal choice, but may be a choice that is dictated by their living situation. It may be that they live with aging family members who have health issues. Those are fair and reasonable concerns. But that's a pretty large wedge of the people who have been part of the labor market but are not currently working or choosing to work. And it behooves us to spend some time exploring what those reasons are and looking for ways to mitigate those reasons to help those people be part of that upward trend as people move back into the labor market. Next slide. We looked at the APSI level data on increasing use of virtual and I think the bottom of that slide may not be showing completely, virtual and remote supports. So this is for people working in individual, group, and facility-based jobs. What was their source of support at the time of the May survey? The blue bar is in-person support. So for people in individual jobs, about 40% of people were receiving some sort of in-person support. The red bar is remote supports, and over 20% of people were receiving their supports strictly remotely or in some sort of virtual way. And the green bar is a hybrid. And I think the takeaway here that reflects some of what we saw in the APSI data is, even at this point, you know, a good 18, well, that would have been about 15 to 16 months into the pandemic, about 40% of people were receiving at least some of their supports through a virtual mechanism. Next slide. Besides maintaining people working, people took advantage of the opportunities that they had. So actually between October 2019 and May 2021, the average hours worked increased for people from 37 hours over a 2-week period to 40 hours over a 2-week period. A little bit of growth also for people in group integrated jobs. Wages went up substantially, and that's some of the opportunity that's taken place in the labor market in recent years, and some of the wage growth that's happened in the labor market. So for people in individual jobs, average wage, this is earned income over a 2-week period, went from $447 to $521. Next slide. Looking to the future, one of the really interesting data points that we pay attention to is from the National Core Indicators Project that collects data on a wide range of life outcomes as a way of helping DDA think about the impact of the supports people get on their lives broadly. For people who aren't working, the National Core Indicators Project follows up with 2 questions. They ask them if they want a job, and they ask them if there's a goal in their service plan that supports them moving into employment. To me, this is an opportunity slide. So nationally, this is not Maryland's data, this is national data. Nationally, about 20% of people have either an individual job or a group supported job. Of the 80% who don't have a job, almost half say they would like a job, a community job. And of those 40%, of those almost 50% who'd like a community job, and that represents nationally about 250,000 people who get supports from the state IDD agency. That's a lot of people who are demanding an opportunity to work. Of them, only about 40% report that they have a goal in their service plan. That percent varies year to year between about 30 and 40%, which suggests to us that we have an obligation to listen a little better and hear it when people tell us that they want to work, explore deeply enough to understand that desire, and then build some action plans around it so they have a pathway forward. Next slide. As we think about the impact of virtual supports and other changes to the way we provide support, there's been a lot of innovation over the last 18 to 20 months that helps us rethink the work that we do. Virtual coffee dates as a way of people keeping connected, virtual job clubs as a way of connecting people who have moved into the labor force but have a need to keep connected with peers. This new virtual world that we've created gives people a chance to hold connections and relationships that may have been really difficult for them in the past. We've used things like remote interviews and remote job shadowing as ways to give people job exploration experiences and the chance to think deeply about what it is they want to be doing for work. We've dramatically expanded the use of natural supports and had to think more deeply about what it means to facilitate natural supports in the workplace so people are being well supported by coworkers and their supervisors. Next page. Both individuals and families tell us that some of those opportunities are things that they want to continue. Individuals have told us that the ability to be more independent at work, the ability to use the tools that they've learned as they've had to do things virtually, that the ability to make more connections are things that they want to continue. This particular slide summarizes some feedback from roundtable discussions in the community of practice for the Supporting Families project that the National Association of State Developmental Disability Services Directors manages. And what families said in those roundtables is that there were a cluster of things that created real positive change, despite all of the hassle of the pandemic and people being out of work or out of other kinds of program or support situations and opportunities. They said that the increased use of peer-to-peer connections and supports was something that they want to continue post-pandemic. They said that an increased use of self-advocacy, the chance for peers to provide a pathway forward for their sons and daughters, was something they valued. They valued the fact that the supports their son or daughter were getting were more individualized and more customized to their desires. So instead of showing up at 9 o'clock in the morning for a 6-hour day, they could pick and choose the activities that they engaged in, both in the community, but also the virtual activities that were used to bridge the pandemic period. And they really valued the new skills that their sons and daughters learned, again, particularly in their use of technology, as a tool that expanded out into other parts of their lives, helped them use, and were used in a wide variety of ways to connect with friends and others. Next slide. All of these things, kind of the positive light of this pandemic, has been to force us to think about what the future looks like. The strong message from individuals and families is we want more flexibility. We want flexibility in our schedules. If I'm not a morning person, I don't want to get up at 6 o'clock and get on the bus. I'd like to build a day around a schedule that works for me. I'd like to pick and choose the activities I engage in and not necessarily be tied to a 6-hour day. What families from a survey of families in Massachusetts said strongly was, we want more time in the community for our sons and daughters, and we want more job opportunities for our sons and daughters. So they want flexibility in settings they're spending time in and the way that supports are delivered. The continued opportunity to build and create connections is a strong message in imagining the future. People appreciated the ability to build relationships and linkages, even though they were virtual, with people they normally didn't have a chance to connect with, to reach out to businesses that might have been harder for them to reach to and have an opportunity to have a conversation with or tour. Expanded opportunities for discovery and job exploration. And finally, continued use of virtual and remote supports. But actually, I think what I'd like to say here is more expanded use of technology as a tool that all of us rely on day to day in our lives. And now the people we support are using and relying on at a much higher level in their day to day lives. And that creates challenges for how we make that technology available to people and how we support them in using that technology. All of these things create the possibility of a world, as we step back into actively providing supports in person, of giving people what they want more, listening to their personal interests and dreams more, and building lives for them that don't build around a fixed schedule, but build around a flexible set of opportunities to be engaged in employment if that's part of their dream. And as we saw, for most people it is. But also other ways to engage with the community in positive ways. So we have a tremendous amount of opportunity as we hit this kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and the opportunity to take advantage of some of that change is a really positive one for us. So thank you, and it's a real pleasure to have a chance to work with Maryland as you work on making some of these things real.
Thank you, John, so much. We really appreciate your expertise and all the support that you have given the state, especially around the Employment Data Project, but also as we continue to look to the future, and including flexibility and really bringing the national perspective too, so we can learn together with others. So thank you again for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Next, I'm going to actually go to another employment celebration video. So please hold. Well, I just love that. So thank you again to everyone for submitting such wonderful videos of people at work, and to hear directly from them how much they really appreciate the relationships that they form with their colleagues and coworkers and customers, and then why they really enjoy the opportunity to continue to be provided the option to be, community an active citizen. So it's fantastic the fact that we have so many videos and so many of you have contributed, especially during the pandemic and the return to work effort. So we're going to continue to see some more videos through the rest of our day. So the next portion of webinar will be to go over what the Developmental Disabilities Administration has been working on in the past couple years. I'm going to go over first an employment first history, and then talk a little bit about the type of policies that we've been working on to support competitive integrative employment, and some of the updates that we've done in the past year. So just to give a little background on DDA's employment first history. As you heard from before, the Employment Data Initiative and technical assistance really started early on to engage with providers to support and transform their agencies to support people seeking competitive employment. So the administration has really supported, thanks to Deputy Secretary Simons with his leadership, to be able to engage people and train to support those employment outcomes. Then we also had, and we have that actually ongoing. So we have an ongoing transformation effort so that our system of supports are person-centered, and that the DDA has an essential focus area included in the person-centered plan now that focuses on what a person's employment goals are and how we can support that person in that trajectory to their outcome. Then we worked with stakeholders, people, and families to create the Employment First Strategic Plan. It was a fantastic group of people that really, wow, it was well vetted to plan for employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities by engaging with and collaborating with multiple layers of stakeholders, people, and families, so that we made sure that we strategized our efforts in the coming years to support employment first. Then we had a rate study, and that continues. And the purpose of the study was to establish a fair and equitable rate system for services that are provided by the DDA to Marylanders with developmental disabilities. One of our biggest accomplishments from the state is the Ken Capone Equal Employment Act, which ended 14C certificates or sub-minimum wage use. You may see a lot of celebrations from last year, where it officially ended in October 1st of 2020. There was significant progress made, as you can see, related to income and hours and wages now are higher, thanks to the important work that the Equal Employment Act really set forth for Maryland. And now this is a national perspective, as many other states are looking to also cease their sub-minimum wage 14C use, and Maryland has been able to collaborate and support other states in their efforts in doing so. Then we also have ongoing, ensuring that we meet the community settings rule from the Center for Medicaid Services, that people have access to community life choices, that they're living in the community and fully integrated and lead person-centered lives. And so we continue to provide provider organizations, technical assistance relating to settings rule, and we have to meet those expectations by that deadline. So we're really excited that we've had such a long employment first history in Maryland. And on the next slide, you will actually be able to click on these links should you want to research further. We even have the end of the 14C certificate Equal Employment Act report linked here. and then our strategic plan. And all of this is public information as we want to be transparent with people and families ongoing to support Employment First. So that's a little bit of Maryland's history with Employment First. So now I'm going to go over DDA's employment policies that we've really focused on this year in creating some updates that make it a little bit more equitable. And we always take comments from people, families, and stakeholders to make sure that we are messaging correctly and supporting employment outcomes. So on this slide, you will see that we have PolicyStat, which is our system website that actually you can access any of the administration's policies. But today I'm going to be specifically talking about the Meaningful Day and employment policies. So you'll see it circled in a little red. You can click on it. Today I'm going to be going over the updates from Meaningful Day policies, the transportation visual scenarios, the competitive integrative employment policy, and the CIE checklist. That's our acronym for competitive integrative employment. The employment services and conflict of interest policy update, as well as the Meaningful Day training policy and training reimbursement. So with that, the Meaningful Day policy updates. Meaningful Day services refer to both current and future menu of our administration services just designed to support people of all abilities receiving our services on every part of their life. And that includes their path to employment and or community-based outcomes and goals. So the updates that we worked on this year was that we included our new CMS approved waiver amendment 3 service scope. What that means is that if any definitions changed in our waivers, that we want to make sure that our policies are updated to reflect the language. So one of the major things that we were able to include in waiver amendment 3 was the virtual service delivery. So as John explained and our other partners explained earlier, people have been able to receive supports in a hybrid model, meaning that there were some virtual capabilities for some of our Meaningful Day services and employment services. So a person may be supported through a virtual method, such as FaceTime or any kind of virtual with technology, and that was included in our waiver amendment 3 update. So we updated our Meaningful Day policy to include those new options. Then we also had employment services discovery milestone documentation instructions. So discovery is sometimes the first step in the process of a person thinking about employment. What are their resources? There are several different milestones that a provider can write documentation and have a packet of really what the person is looking for in a customized employment experience pathway. So with those milestone updates, we just decided to put in where this would be captured in the person-centered plan, and that was included in the policy update. So then we have Meaningful Day transportation visual scenarios. So at the DDA, we understand that creating a visual guide sometimes is more person-centered and friendly to understand what a policy may be explaining. So we wanted to assist stakeholders, people, and families with understanding the difference between transportation that's included in a Meaningful Day service and then our standalone transportation service. And the guide is available in attachments under that Meaningful Day policy. We made sure that the visuals are color-coded, which was kind of fun to actually play around with. So the different cars and the different colors actually represent what is included in standalone transportation versus Meaningful Day. And you'll see that on the next slide. It also represents a variety of transportation people may use to support their Meaningful Day or employment. So getting to and from work, for example, how that's done in a person-centered way is represented on the scenario. So with this is just a screenshot of the visual scenarios. We tried to make sure that it is person-centered, that it's to be used as a guide. there are many different scenarios that a person may have in getting to and from work, for example, but this is just a visual guide to help with person-centered planning processes. As you can see, we color-coded the cars blue and green, a little different so that you could see what would be included. So that, again, is under attachments in Meaningful Day policies. All right. Meaningful Day training policy update. So in addition to the DDA core training requirements, each employment specialist providing a service or deliverable under job development, discovery, or self-employment development supports must have the CESP, which is the Certified Employment Support Professional certification to provide that support. There's some links on this slide that are helpful to click if you want to learn more about this, but the DDA will continue to pay for this training and the CESP test reimbursable until we fully transition into our new system, LTSS. The DDA service training phase-in plan, the policy originally had said that that providers were required to submit a phase-in plan. We are no longer requiring that a training phase-in plan be submitted to the DDA. So those were the two takeaways from Meaningful Day training policy. And then the competitive and integrative employment update. So the competitive integrative employment policy defines what competitive integrative employment at the DDA is. And then competitive integrative employment has the following items. A person has competitive wages and the same opportunities for advancement and benefits as a person without a disability, and requires that the individual work in an integrated location. That means that they're not segregated or in isolation from the general population, that they're treated with the same amount of respect and advancement as anybody with or without a disability. So the DDA CIE policy defines these standards, and an updated competitive integrative employment checklist has been created to be used during person-centered planning, assessing whether or not a person's employment meets those standards to be authorized for the support. Because our employment services are geared to support competitive integrative employment. We have some supports that are for non-competitive employment, but that is a different category. So this is to be authorized for the employment services. So the CIE checklist, this is a screenshot of what it looks like. As you can see, it's a fillable form. We added an NA section, and then we also added where a person would be filing this in the person-centered plan in client attachments. So, and that's thanks to people that are probably participating on this webinar series for always giving us great feedback so that we can continue to define and really make sure that the policies and the attachments make sense and that they're friendly and easy to understand. So thank you for all of your feedback. All right. So that was all of our policy updates of what we've been doing this year. Again, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. My contact information is going to be at the end of this webinar, but we have been definitely appreciating all of the feedback and comments so that from all stakeholders so that we continue to define our policies to support employment outcomes. So then I'm going to do a quick update about value-based payments. Some of you may have already seen or participated, but in February of 2021, DDA and the National Association of State Directors of the Developmental Disability Services hosted a kickoff webinar introducing value-based payments and projected planning that Maryland was going to begin to research and collaborate with stakeholders for a value-based payment on employment supports. And in layman's terms, basically a value-based payment is an outcome payment so that you get paid after you reach the outcome. So in this case, there could be a value-based payment after a person may get a job, for the person that supported them in getting that job. And then also there could be something on maintaining that job as well. So if you are interested in that presentation, please click that link. And then also, we're going to continue to be in the very beginning research phase where we're just orientating or having an orientation to value-based payments. Internally, DDA has had some wonderful engagement from other states, but we're in the very, very beginning phases of really looking at and what value-based payments would mean. And to do this correctly and to be able to really plan for the success of a value-based payment is a long process. So we're really excited to continue to research and orient ourselves to different practices, different methodologies that support employment outcomes for all. All right. And so with that, we're going to look at employment first, the road to recovery. So our position is that we're going to continue to strengthen partnerships and collaboration. As you've heard throughout this whole webinar and from John especially, that people want flexible and innovative support models. People want to be able to have flexible services and supports to support employment, including hybrid and remote supports. So we're going to continue to support that. And then we want to increase training and opportunity for staff development. I think that's a really key point that the administration is very focused on supporting. Training when we're talking about virtual and remote services, as you can see in the beginning of this webinar, it can be a little daunting to learn how to use technology, or especially a new technology. So we want to be able to support direct support professionals, managers, people to access technology and have training around that. We also want to increase our return to work efforts and community membership. We've continued to support people, and the people participating on this webinar, thank you so much for your return to work efforts. As you can see, we continue to be a leader in competitive integrated employment and supporting people of all disabilities and abilities to employment. And we want to continue our return to work efforts so that next time, hopefully, we'll see another 3% bump in our return to work effort. Then we want to increase quality employment outcomes for people with disabilities. We want the employment to be a customized employment, that a person not only is working a job, but loves their job, that they have value, that they're integrated into the community, that they have relationships with their employer, their colleagues, their coworkers, and their customers. We want to be able to support quality outcomes of employment for all people. And so with that, I want to play one last video highlighting employment celebrations. Okay, well, I just love the fact that we are able to highlight so many workers and so many experiences where people are valued at their job and given the opportunity. And it's fantastic to see that Maryland is very dedicated to increase opportunity for all people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in employment. So with that, I would like to just thank the Employment First State Leadership Team, some of which are on here, Lori and Alan. Lori Lyons, Program Manager for Service Coordination, and Alan Sheehan, Chief Program Officer for Abilities. They really were the video editors and contributors. They helped me gather all of the employment videos. So we really just want to thank the Employment First State Leadership Team for the continued dedication, and especially these team members for the fantastic videos. On the next slide, you'll see the employment partners, some of which you might have noticed there might have been a logo or something, but then the people that are currently highlighted in here, we received submissions from some of these employment partners and providers. So we want to just make sure to thank you so much for your contributions. We really appreciate the ability to highlight such great work. And with that, I wanted to just wrap up and say thank you so much. Thank you to Deputy Secretary Bernie Simons for always supporting Employment First, and Director of Programs Patricia Sestoki, as well as our leadership, Scott Dennis at Doors, and at the Department of Disabilities, Christian Mealey and Carol Beatty, Secretary Beatty. Thank you so much for your contributions. This is how you can actually stay in touch with us, sign up for our mailings and trainings, and read newsletters, or submit stories to myself to be highlighted in those newsletters. So I don't know if Deputy Secretary, if you have any last words, but thank you so much for everything today.
Well, let me just say I want to thank everybody who attended. We've had a good turnout, large numbers, over 200. I also want to thank Christian Mealey and Scott Dennis for our partners. In other state agencies, we're a collaborative effort, and I know as Scott said earlier, we also share some of the same providers for DOORS as well as DDA. So it was great to have Christian present the governor's proclamation. I thank you for that. And with that, I want to congratulate Kathleen and you all of the folks who put this together today. It was really wonderful.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Really appreciate your support. Well, and with that, there's the attachment for the PowerPoint, as Donna Will, our training director, said below, and you will also be able to see this online on our employment website. Thank you so much for joining us today and to celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Thank you for your dedication to Employment First. Have a great day.